Hello, in this video we're going to take a further look at variables and we're going to look at adding numbers together. If you feel confused at this stage, that's absolutely normal. You probably should feel confused, but things are going to get clearer as you go through the course. As long as you practice what we're doing, it's very important that you try this out for yourself. Incidentally, you might wonder what kinds of variables there are in Java, and we're going to be looking at that in the course. But for now, I just want to direct your attention to a page. If you type into a search engine Java primitive types and maybe click on one of these links, let's go to the sort of official Oracle documentation, primitive data types in Java. And you can see here, you don't have to read this or anything, but you can see that there are various types listed, and int is one of them. You can also see that it has a maximum value that we can put in it. That's 2 to the power of 31 minus 1. There's a reason why it's such a strange kind of value, but we needn't go into that. And the minimum value you can put in is minus 2 to the power of 31. Okay, don't worry about that though. Let's have a look then. So what can we do with this? Well, one thing we can do is addition. And in fact, the way I've written this here is unnecessarily verbose. We can do this more briefly, more quickly. So I've declared a variable here. I've declared a variable called cats, and here I've assigned the value 7 to the variable cats. We can do that in one single step. Before we do that, let's create a duplicate of our project. And if you're working on code and you've got something that works and then you don't want to disturb that, or it's possible that you might mess it up with how you're about to change it, it's a really good idea to take a copy of it. Either that, or you could use a version control system like Git, for example, but we're just going to make a copy. So I'm going to right click my project and go to copy. Then I'm just going to click in a blank space in Eclipse in the Package Explorer, right click and go to paste. And we can give this a new name now. Let's call it addition and click copy. So now we've got a new project. I would recommend creating projects from scratch until you feel completely familiar with that, rather than just copying projects. But anyway, so let's run that. So I'm going to select my app, click run, and it runs just as before. But now let's delete this int cats. And so now we've got an error. Why have we got an error? It's because, let's hover over the error. It says cats cannot be resolved to a variable. That's because I'm trying to output the value contained in this cats variable, but I haven't declared the cats variable and I haven't assigned a value to it. What we're going to do now is declare it and assign a value in a single step. Now this has to be above where you're using the variable. So wherever you use a variable, above that somewhere in your code, you have to declare it. So let's write int cats equals 7. So I'm declaring it and I'm assigning a value to it in one single step. Remember, your program is going to execute line by line, so it's going to go down your code block here, and that's why we've first got to declare a variable before we can use it. It has to be above. Because this is going to get read by the Java runtime environment before this is read and executed. Okay, so that will do the same as the program we had before. We can run it and it just outputs 7. Now let's say we've also got dogs. So let's write int dogs equals, let's say we've got 5 dogs. And by some miracle, we can stop the dogs eating the cats. Again, we've got a warning because we've not used the value of dogs yet. What I'm going to do is add these together. And to do that, I need a third variable. I'm going to type int total equals cats plus dogs. And then using my system.out.print line, I'm going to output the value of total. It should be 12. So let's run this. And down here we have 12. What have we done here? So we declare a variable called cats and assign the value 7 to it. We declare a variable called dogs, assign the value 5 to it. And then we declare a variable called total, and the value that we assign to total is the number of cats plus the number of dogs, and then we output it. Try that for yourself. It is easy to make mistakes here. So for example, you can't have two variables called cats in your code block here. If we try that, we get an error. If we hover over that error, it says duplicate local variable cats. Let's delete the second one. In fact, in Eclipse, if I just put my cursor on a line, and then in the Mac, if I do Command D, or in Windows, I think it would be Control D, that deletes the line. So it's quite a handy shortcut. Control D or Command D to delete a line. If I'm giving you any of the wrong shortcuts for Windows, you can always type into a search engine something like Eclipse shortcuts, Eclipse shortcut keys, something like that, and you'll find a whole list quite easily. Okay, so try replicating this program. Try changing these numbers to different numbers and see if it still works. You can also try giving them different names, so they don't have to be cats, dogs, and total. You might run into problems. You can't have spaces in variable names. You can't have punctuation in there. You should always start them with a lowercase first letter. That is very important. Without that, your program will work. So I could write total here with a capital T, and it would still run, probably. Well, it would do if I have to change both of them, of course. Well, that's not obvious. Let me explain that. Let's run this. So that works with a capital T on total, for example, or I could put a capital C cats or a capital D on dogs, but it's very bad practice. The standard in Java is that variables start with a lowercase first letter. So if you're using the conventional coding style in Java, which we are, you should always start your variables with a lowercase first letter. Don't do anything crazy with them. For the moment, just keep them all lowercase. And notice that Java is case sensitive. So a variable called dogs with a capital D is different to a variable called dogs with a lowercase d. See, that's only a warning. Whereas if I had lowercase d, I get an error. Seems to be some street cleaning taking place outside. Apologies for the noise. Okay, anyway, so let's get rid of that. What we want to aim for at the moment is creating legal, reasonable code written in the standard style. So create something that looks like this and try it out. And try tweaking it, change the numbers, change the variable names, see if you can get it to work. And don't forget that if you change cats here, you have to change the name of it here as well. The same for all of these variables. You have to be consistent. Okay, have a go at that, and until next time, happy coding. Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at outputting variables. So far we've got this really simple program, and I've created a copy of this and I've called it outputting variables. So maybe create a new program yourself, and we're going to change this code. Okay, so one thing I should say here is that it's really valuable to just type stuff over and over again. I think it's too easy to imagine that programming is primarily an intellectual exercise. Of course it is an intellectual exercise, but a lot of the learning that you need to undertake is kind of related to your fingers. You have to get into the habit of typing things and getting used to typing them, and you sort of develop a kind of almost a muscle memory and you get used to just typing particular programming constructs. So rather than copy your last project, always type it out again for the moment. If you want to really accelerate your learning, learn to touch type without looking at the keys, and you can find lots of programs on the internet to help you with that. But anyway, okay, so I've got this program here, and we're outputting the value total, but I can actually add some text to that. So within the round brackets here of system.out.println line, I'm going to write total number of animals. Let's put a colon there. This is just text, and then a space, and then I'll close the speech mark like this. And then after the closing speech mark here, so after this, I'm going to put a space and a plus, space, and then total. Now, before we discuss what this is, let's see it running. Let's run it. And it says total number of animals, 12, which is much more helpful. If you're actually going to write a program, for example, I don't know, to help you calculate something, help you do your tax, whatever, obviously it's very useful to output text with your numbers. So we've already used a plus sign here, and what this plus sign did was it added the values stored in these two variables together. Or as a quick way of saying that, I could say that it adds these two variables together. It adds the number of cats and the number of dogs, adding cats and dogs. These two variables are both of type int or integer variables. Now what we're doing here is something different. The plus sign actually has a different meaning. We've got some text here, and we are adding an integer to it. So you can't add text to integers. You can't add like the word giraffe to the number 13, let's say. It makes no sense. What this is actually doing is it's turning this number into some text and concatenating it with this text. So it's essentially it's joining the number to some text. It's kind of a text operation, and the result is what we see in the console below, which is this. We can also output, so after we've declared the variables and given them values, we can output all of them if we want. Let's write that. Let's try that. Let's write sysout control space and number of cats and plus cats. Notice that I left a space before the closing speech mark. Everything within the closing speech mark, within the speech marks, is just text. So even this space is just some text, but it looks nicer when it's output if we put space there, because we get this nice space here. And it's really important to strive for legibility and beauty in all of your coding. It'll make it a lot easier. So if I write number of cats and then plus cats and then output that, let's run it. So it says number of cats 7, total number of animals 12. Let's output the number of dogs as well. So I'm going to write it here. Number of dogs. One thing this is really useful for is helping you to get bugs out of your code, because whatever variables you have in your program, you can quickly output the values of them just using sysout, system.out.println, and that can be very, very helpful. So now we're outputting the number of cats, dogs, and the total number of them. Let's take a look. There we go. And let's also add some other number of animals in here. So I could write int. What else would you keep in your house? Maybe some people keep rats. I don't see how it's going to be possible to keep all these animals from devouring each other, but anyway. So int rats equals, let's say we've got 3 rats, which is 3 too many in my opinion, but you know, each to their own. So we've said int total equals cats plus dogs. We can just add another plus there, and we can write rats. We can add them all together. Cats plus dogs plus rats. Let's output the number of rats as well, since we've output the number of cats and dogs. Number of rats and plus rats. So we're just using this plus to join the number of rats with this text here. Okay, finally, let's try this. And there we go. We've got number of cats, number of dogs, number of rats, and the total animals is 15, which is too many, but there you go. Okay, try this for yourself. Experiment a little bit, add stuff together. It doesn't have to be animals, can be whatever you want. The important thing is to type it out and create your project from scratch as well. Don't copy it. Copying is useful, but at this stage, the important thing is to get practice writing out code. Okay, so until next time, happy coding.